Ken Hines, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew.
Very big question, isn't it? The impact of the Macpherson report. But just give me your thoughts 20 years on, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, 20 years on, Macpherson made 63 recommendations. What we're seeing is that they're now, many of those key recommendations is being rolled back, where there's less accountability and transparency with the police. So institutionalised racism is still prevalent throughout the criminal justice system. What that looks like on the ground is that the police can sometimes be a law unto themselves, if not checked and monitored. It can be very scary when you're wrongly on the receiving end. Some victim has likened it to slavery all over again, where the black man is having to run the gauntlet. So I'm saying 20 years on, then disproportionality level, where you're, as a black man, you're 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched, are the similar sort of figures that was there 20 years ago. And I'm disappointed.
Ken, you've been stopped and searched, haven't you? Tell us what the Haringey Independent Stop and Search Group is all about. Is your attitude informed by having been stopped and searched yourself and seen others been stopped and searched? Tell me about that. I've been stopped and searched once on a motorcycle. I took my helmet off and they said, "Oh, don't worry," and I put my helmet back on again and they let me on my way. What's it like to live with stop and search? Tell people, Ken.
Well, I've been stopped and searched over 126 times now, and what that feels like, it feels like pretty embarrassing. It's horrific. We called it stop and scarred, and what that looks like on the ground is that I have to question myself. What am I doing this for? I want to try to make things better, but even when I try to make things better, the police look at me not as a help, but more like a threat. Now, to me, you're not going to learn unless you've got critical partners who's going to tell you what is the impact is on communities.
Okay.
Now, just quickly saying,
sure.
And what that does, it alienates the very community that's disproportionately affected by the violence.
I find this use of language really bizarre. The way he refers to violence as this kind of entity that exists in the ether. It floats above black people. And the blacks, they are merely affected by the violence. They aren't doing violence. They aren't disproportionately committing violence. No. They are simply affected by it. And that makes no sense. It's really, really weird. Just admit blacks are committing the violence. They are disproportionately stabbing people. That's what's happening. It's not some weird ghost that floats around attacking blacks. No, it's the blacks who you should be scared of.
Is that if you've been stopped and searched today, why would tomorrow I go and give the police any kind of intelligence?
Well, Ken, hold on a second, though. You said, the numbers vary, the ratios, whether you're 5 times, 6 times or 7 times more likely as a black person to be stopped as a white man. You are 20 times more likely to die of a knife wound if you're a black man than a white man. And so...
Again, here, they can tell us who is being stabbed. Why can't they tell us who is doing the stabbing? Who is taking a knife and ramming it into someone's flesh? That's really important. I want to know who those people are. And crucially, are they doing it at a 20 times higher rate than other groups? That's really important because I want to avoid those people. They are dangerous people. But why can't we know that information? Why can't Andrew Castle just say, look, the blacks are doing a crazy amount of violent crime. Maybe it would be wise not to relax around these people. Maybe, just maybe.
As Trevor Phillips, the former chair of the Commission for Racial Equality, was saying in a great piece in the Mail yesterday, he's saying, look, if it takes me 10 minutes longer to get home and a life is saved, most importantly mine, I'm prepared to take that.
That's Trevor. But if Trevor or any of his family member has been injured or have life-changing injuries or even have been killed by the hands of the police, I don't think he'd be saying that very same comment, because that's insensitive of Trevor when he, as a black man, should know what we've been been going through for the last 40 years. Now, don't get me wrong, stop and search has got a place, but it's got to be done professionally. It's got to be done with good intelligence, and less of the fishing expedition, and less of the aggression that we are facing the black community. Because as people like Trevor's saying, yes, we are disproportionately affected by the violence. But as I said to you beforehand, stop and search, instead of helping situation, could hinder situation by making it less likely that people are going to want to say, well, I'm not going to the police to sort my, to tell them what's going on. I'm going to take the law into my own hands.
Let's get the view of Peter Kirkham now, a former Detective Chief Inspector with the Metropolitan Police. Peter, you've heard what Ken has had to say. Do you want to respond to that, stop and search suggestions first, and then move on and tell us what your views 20 years on are of the Macpherson report?
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed, really. I heard Ken on Tuesday night talking on another programme with Tom Swarbrick, and I was really quite impressed with what he was saying there, and thought maybe he was a bit more balanced and proportionate in his approach now. But we're back to the hyperbole with what he's just said about slavery and all the rest of it. And linking stop and search to death in custody and all the rest of it. We've got two basic problems in terms of misunderstandings here. One of them is about what institutional racism is and isn't. And the other night, one thing that Ken did was refer to it as institutionalised racism, which is very different. It's where there's so much racism, it's become the norm for the organisation. And that is quite specifically what Macpherson didn't find. If you actually read the Macpherson report, you'll find that he didn't find any significant individual overt racism anywhere in the Met. Paragraph 6.3, if anyone wants to go and look at it. What he did find was institutional racism. I really wish he'd come up with a different phrase for it. There were two factors to that, broadly speaking. One of them is the structure, the policies, the organisation itself, the way it's set up and operates. And the second aspect is ethnocentricity, seeing the world through our own eyes. So if you've got a majority of white officers, then they're seeing the world through the eyes of white people born and bred in this country. And so if the world looks different through different eyes of different people brought up in different places and different cultures, then there's obviously some sort of potential for stereotyping and bias and such like that. Now, those two things can't be avoided. It was nice to hear you mention that he didn't just find the Metropolitan Police were subject to this, because if you actually think about it, it impacts on every organisation that is put together by and then operated by an overwhelming demographic. And it applies to gender and religion as well as race.
Police services should respect their communities and reflect their communities. Has that happened, Peter, before I go back to Ken?
It hasn't, but I would argue not through want of trying. They could have done better and they could have done different things, and I would criticise quite a lot of what the Met and other forces have done. They haven't shown much imagination and innovation in terms of how they go about things. And the other night, Ken mentioned that he would encourage members of his family and others that he speaks to join the police. And I think he used the phrase that he'd like to swamp the police with recruits from the black community. I'd absolutely agree with that. So the police could have done more to make that happen. But we mustn't lose sight of the fact there is a very, very significant barrier within some communities. And Ken the other night drew the parallel or mentioned the fact that the black community were particularly underrepresented compared to Asian and other groups. And that barrier is very strong in the black community.
Okay.
Now, just to conclude here, this idea of swamping the police force with the black recruits, that's a really bad idea. That is terrifying, because there is not one black nation or black city on this planet, majority, by the way, majority black, that is not corrupt. We're talking the US, the UK, well, not the UK yet, but Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, wherever you have blacks in a majority in positions of power, they are corrupt. That's what happens. It's just reality. And so no, if there are good black people in these communities who want to put an end to the violence, they need more white men, white hetero men joining the police. That's how you deal with the violent crime. Black people, they need white people. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. And is stop and search in any way comparable to slavery? I mean, holy shit. Like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe, please comment. Ilu Sassoon. Peace out.